Looks like everybody can hear me. So we're live on Facebook. Welcome everybody. It's Cachaça Day today. My name is Dragos Axinte. I'm the CEO of Novo Fogo, and we are here to do part 2 of our webinar series called Why Cachaça Matters. Today we're talking about barrel aging cachaça, and in the context of a very important historical day. The Cachaça, National Cachaça Day goes back in history to the 1600s when a underground movement known as the Cachaça Revolt made some changes to the government actions against cachaça to re-legalize it. And in 1661, that the Cachaça Revolt made cachaça legal again, and we celebrate it every year as much as we can, perhaps with a bottle of something special. I will be drinking this at the end, not until then though. And so today we're going to episode 2, and I will use some slides in order to kind of capture what we're doing here for the recording. And I'm going to share my screen now with all of you. And here is my presentation. So you may remember, if you were with us in episode 1 a couple of weeks ago, perhaps, that we talked about the farming aspect of cachaça. We called that episode "We Are Farmers First." And during that episode, we showed what it's like to plant sugarcane and harvest sugarcane and press sugarcane and ferment and distill it, and showed a little bit of the distillery, our organic processes, the zero waste mentality that we have. And today we're going to talk about barrel aging. That's going to take us back in history. And in a couple of more weeks, we're going to have a third episode about the folks who work at the distillery themselves, where you will be able to talk to them directly. So today is a little bit different for us, and that's why we had a little hiccup at the beginning. We have panelists from 4 different locations. I'm here in Issaquah, Washington, at our headquarters in the United States, at my home office. And then we have 3 folks in Brazil who are helping us with their part of the presentation. I'm going to actually introduce them each to you right now. So guys, take yourselves off of mute for just 1 second, so I can do that. Let's see. At our distillery in Brazil is Torres. Torres, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Nice to see you today.
Hello, Torres. It looks like a sunny day over there. We're glad that you have good signal, and we'll come back to you so you can show us the barrels. Everybody, Torres is the founder of our distillery and still runs the distillery today with much energy and gusto. Thank you, Torres.
Thank you.
At his lab at the university in Curitiba, we have Professor Agenor Maccari Jr., aka Dr. Cachaça. Say hello, Agenor.
Hi, Dragos. How are you?
I'm doing fine, thank you, Agenor. So Agenor will show us his experiments with Brazilian woods, and he is at the lab because he has many different kinds of barrels of a lot of diversity in the lab, and we thought it would be interesting for you to take a peek in his lab where Dr. Cachaça works. It's the happiest university lab in the world. Let me promise you that. And then right at the end, we're going to go to Kurt and Miriam, who are in Mojetes, a few kilometers away from Torres, at Pousada Graciosa, a beautiful little chalet resort. And they are the owners of a piece of land where they're leading a reforestation project that we're becoming involved in. Say hello, guys.
Hello, Dragos. Hi. How are you?
Hello, old friends. So we are going to go to them at the end to talk to you about the project that we're starting with them right now, and you will get to see a peek around what's behind them in the beautiful rainforest of Mojetes. So I'm going to go back to my slides here and guide you through the history of barrel aging, really as it makes an impact to the choices that we make today in how we age cachaça. And I'll start with a couple of shocking truths, perhaps some things that you did not know. For example, almost all of the cachaça labels that are made in Brazil, and that means at least 4,000 of them total, are aged in barrels. Perhaps there is a perception here that Cachaça is unaged. That has to do with the fact that Cachaça in the United States is super, super young, and there isn't a whole lot of history of the Brazilian Cachaça history hasn't been translated to the United States, but we're part of that effort to make that change. And today we're going to explain to you why this is the norm in Brazil. That is an Agenor without a beard over there in a store called Cachaça, spelled a little funny, in Curitiba, that has probably 650 labels of Cachaça, of which the store owner said 98% are aged in barrels. And here's another view of this beautiful store where we go on a regular basis. You can see how much color is on the shelves. And then another shocking fact is the fact that most of those barrel-aged cachaças are in fact aged in oak. A lot of them aged American oak, but there's also some French oak because there's quite a bit of interest in limousine oak from Brazilians. And this perhaps comes as a surprise to you as well, but there's a reason why this is happening too, that is both historical and actual too. And perhaps the thing that you'll hear today is that there's quite a bit of scientific fact to the things that we say, and also some ambiguity, because we're discovering as we go. We're really going deep back in history, trying to understand what's happened and where things are and where it's going. And this is kind of a big deal because there are so many producers in Brazil. Today, there are about 4,000 legal brands. There are probably 40, 50,000 total producers, many of them not really producing in the market, but producing for themselves. So as a result, what we're doing today is a combination of science and interpretation, and we're trying our best to give you the story as we know it best to us. And it starts really with a little bit of climatology and some natural biology here. In general, tropical woods are very hard because they fight two enemies: humidity and insects. Both of these things try to destroy the wood, so as the trees. So as a result, trees have a few mechanisms of adaptation which are related to most of the time, increasing their density to stop the penetration of these enemies. They literally become harder in order to reject these intruders. This happens with most of the Brazilian woods. There are some exceptions, and those exceptions are typically in the north, perhaps in the Amazon, where the canopy of the jungle is so thick that some trees choose to, in fact, reduce their density so they can grow really fast and penetrate that canopy and become the first ones to reach the sunlight. So they actually have access to resources in a less dense kind of way. But for the most part, Brazilian woods are hard. That's why they're called hardwoods. And that makes them really useful for construction and flooring and furniture making, all sorts of things that relate to their high density. In the picture here, you see zebra wood. It's a pillar of Araribá that we have sourced from an abandoned house on our property. On the left, you see the actual tree. We did not cut that tree down. We love the Araribá trees and all the trees. But this, you can see, was a pillar in a house. Excuse me. And Agenor and I were trying to cut this thing down one time. If you remember, Agenor, we were using a hacksaw for about 10 minutes, and we made a dent about half a centimeter, probably a quarter of an inch thick. It's that hard. And if you look at Wikipedia and search for the hardness of woods, there's a measure called Janka hardness. And Janka is a measurement that shows the force necessary to embed a piece of steel into the wood, right? And the more force you need, the harder the wood is. So here you can see at the top some of the hardest woods that exist. And I just want to put this up here so you can see how many times the word Brazilian features in these top 10 or 15 woods in the world. And that does go back to the climate itself. So as a result, we've seen Brazilian woods being used for all sorts of things that relate to how well they can preserve themselves in a situation of structural stability, situation of perhaps furniture resilience, flooring, and so on. And this is also what we see in our world today up here, perhaps. This is from the web. This is a tiger wood tree on the left. It's a very close cousin to our zebra wood, the Araribá that I showed you earlier. And look how pretty it is in the picture in the middle. And it becomes flooring very quickly, and it's very easy to buy it. Some things are more expensive than others, but look at this thing. It's really not expensive at all. So as a result, these Brazilian woods have gotten around the world, and they've been abused over the centuries. And this kind of makes space for the challenges that we have today. As a result, the high density of these woods generally does not make them good for aging spirits, because in order to age spirits, you want, in fact, a porous wood. You want a softer wood that the spirit can extract flavor from. And you want a wood that has pores so that the air can enter those pores, enter the liquid, and oxidize the liquid in a positive way. They are not very good for these kinds of things. There are some exceptions for some of the high resin producing woods. Those create a lot of flavor really fast. We'll talk about those in a second. But in general, there's a little bit of a challenge in working with Brazilian hardwoods in aging cachaça. So they have, however, been useful in storing cachaça, because over the centuries, wood was available. Perhaps copper or steel were not available. So you could make a storage container out of wood. And this is what we know to be the largest cachaça barrel in the world. It's owned by Ethioca. It's in their museum. And it's very, very large. I believe it's oak, but I'm not sure. It probably might be a Brazilian wood of some sort. And what we found in our research is that over the centuries, pretty much anything that was available to store cachaça was used to store cachaça. Whatever people had, whatever they could afford, and woods were one of those things. But storing cachaça is really quite different from aging cachaça, as we'll talk in a second. And you can see this is a live distillery in our town, Mojetes. They use still these very large barrels, not quite as big as the Ethioca barrel, but very large barrels. And they've been used for a long, long time. They really don't have anything to give. They're just used for storage. They're not necessarily used for aging. They're just there to hold things. So there have been a lot of influences over the utilization of Brazilian woods over time. There have been many factors that have contributed to the depletion of Brazilian woods, and you can see some of them listed here. They are big. These things are very big factors, because when something is available and something is useful, people kind of flock to it. So as a result, it led to situations like this one here. This is in the Amazon. This is an illegal logging operation. This used to be all rainforest in the past, and now it's that you see there. A lot of fallen trees, a lot of roads. Very hard to enforce because it's deep in the heart of the Amazon somewhere, and it's very hard for police to come and shut that down. There are only about 6,000 enforcement officers in all of the Amazon. That is the size of a continent, so how could they do much anyway? And look at that statistic at the bottom there. I don't know if you guys can see it. Perhaps you can maximize the screen, but it says by The Guardian in the UK that more than three quarters of the wood that is shipped from the main state in the Amazonian forest is illegally felled. That's over 3/4 of the wood is illegally felled. That's a lot more than you can possibly imagine. And we know about deforestation, but there's some hidden enemies as well. So just degradation. And degradation is this very interesting thing that happens below the naked eye. It happens below the canopy. You may be looking down at the jungle from the satellite or from a plane and see green, but below green is this. And these are the indirect effects of human habitation. These are fires that are started by humans. These are resulted from cattle grazing, from just things that happen when humans go and try to farm things and cut trees down to plant something or other. That negative effect expands. And this has led to some dramatic changes to the Brazilian landscape. I showed this map last time in a different context. Let me tell you about this. This is the Amazon. It has lost about 20% of its mass over the years. But more importantly, this is the Atlantic rainforest, Mata Atlântica, our beloved forest, right there. You know how much it's lost? It's lost 93% of its original mass. It used to go all the way into here. And that's because of all of those things that I had on the earlier slide. Urbanization, all the big cities are right here on the coast. And they're big. Logging, growing things that like sugarcane and soy, but not for agricultural purposes, but to make ethanol from them, because ethanol is a highly valuable resource. And up until recently, Brazil was the #1 exporter of ethanol. But Brazil also uses ethanol for for the engines, for motor engines. So this has changed the landscape in a dramatic way. And it has done even more than that. Look, deforestation once was the #1 source of pollution in the world. Now it's no longer that. It's only about 10% because of efforts of Brazil to cut it down. But if you think about what happens when you cut down a tree, it's kind of a double whammy. You cut down the tree so it no longer can pull carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, but it also kind of kicks out all that oxygen that it's been storing. So it becomes a polluting agent to the environment. And you know what pollution does too, right? So you start with deforestation and you get into some major global changes that affect everybody. So a tree that's cut down right there before Miriam could have a gigantic impact to the air in Chicago. And this is part of our mantra here. This is something that has become so important to us that we almost feel like Cachaça is our vehicle for delivering this higher message of really what we're talking about today. There's some good news too. Because of the negative destruction, the centuries of destruction that occurred, and the lack of organization in Brazil for preventing that destruction. In the last 20 years, and really in the last 20 years, there's been kind of a resurgence in the Brazilian understanding of this issue. And for centuries, the world basically told Brazil, you are the steward of our world forests. Here's how you're going to do things. That doesn't really work very well because you can't go to your neighbor and say, here's how you're going to rearrange your yard. You have to go and give the right incentives to that neighbor to do a good job. So Brazil has awakened when it comes to environmental policy. In the last 20 years, there has been a lot of progress. And you can see some of the things that really were introduced in the last 20 years, or perhaps were reformed to protect the land a little bit more. And this has led to some good things too. So the one that affects us, however, is kind of a double-edged sword. It's the understanding that suddenly the woods that we've been using historically in the production of cachaça most of them are endangered. And you can see on the table here, perhaps you can see, I hope, that these are the top dozen or so trees used in the production of cachaça. Out of about 300 species of Brazilian trees that are endangered, most of these are endangered too. And you can look in the right there, all the stuff in the red is endangered. Vulnerable, near threatened, and endangered are all part of the endangered category. They're just subcategories. And above that, you only have extinct in the wild and then extinct everywhere, right? So from endangered to extinct is a very small step. Even from vulnerable and near threatened to extinct is a very small step. And this, unfortunately, is information that is not really available. This is something that Agenor Torres and I spent months trying to organize. And Agenor has been working on this for decades, right? And he understands all of this. But this information is just not available. So we had to look at various kinds of sources, try to understand what wood is what. And it's so difficult to figure out the connection between the Brazilian wood, the Brazilian name, the American name, the scientific name, make sure that we don't make mistakes. Typically, when we came to a conflict, we took the more common, the more recent status, and also the more strict status. So I want you to notice these things, and we'll talk about how to address them. Because look, if you don't know, what you don't know can kill you, and what you don't know can really kill some trees and can kill some forests and can have all that devastating cascading effect. So I hope that you can come back to this. We're going to record this, obviously, and it's going to be available on our Facebook page for sure. You can come and watch it again, and feel free to share it. We are very proud of the information we've collected, and we want to distribute it as widely as we possibly can. So there are a number of different solutions for this problem, and I'm talking specifically about the cachaça world now. And one of them are called oak barrels. Oak barrels have been in Brazil for a long, long time. They have been introduced by the Portuguese colonists. They were bringing their own liquids from Portugal and really European colonists in general. But the Portuguese have this thing called bagaceira, that is a grape brandy, and they brought it over to Brazil over the centuries in oak barrels, and the barrels stayed, and some of them made it to cachaça production and so on. And they have been around for a long time, but there was a lot of disorganization. So finally, recently, in the last, 15 years, something like that, 12 years really, the Brazilian government passed some legislation that says, hey, we got to sort out to what's called aged and what's called something else. And they came up with these rules. In order to call something aged, the liquid, a minimum of 50% of the liquid must spend at least 1 year in a wooden barrel, no larger than 700 liters. That's significant. All these three things have to be met in order to call something barrel aged. And if it doesn't meet these things, then it could be called something else. It could be called rested, for example, if it sits in a container of some sort, right? This has led to a lot of different preferences that are geographical, and they are related to the fact that in the north, perhaps where there's been maybe more history of cachaça, the palate of the Mineiro, the drinkers from Minas Gerais, likes cachaça lighter colored, higher proof, rested in their typical woods, which don't give very much color or flavor because they are so hard. Whereas in the south, that is much more European, there is a predilection towards oak. More color is better, more vanilla is better. And if you travel to Brazil, you see these differences are very, very common, and they make a big difference in the way that the natural resources of that particular place are actually being utilized. So my partner Torres, who is in Brazil, built this distillery in 2013, and he comes from a very very technical pedigree and also some important philosophical foundations for when he built this distillery. So I want to actually switch this over to him so he can talk to you guys a little bit about why he chose to use American oak in the early days and how we're doing things there, how we're processing the woods and so on. So Torres, I'm going to switch the video over to you.
Okay, Dragos, thank you. Well, it was very important what you said, Dragos, about all deforestation that we have in Brazil. And just to know, I don't know how many of you knows the origin of the name Brazil. The name Brazil was because the first Portuguese colonizers that arrived here found a tree, very red tree, that, well, in Portuguese is similar to that wood that you burn and becomes very red. I don't know how is the name in English, but in Portuguese is brasa. So the name Brazil came from brasa, that is red, and because of pau Brasil, a name of a tree that the first colonizers found here in Brazil. And as you may know, it's very hard to find this tree today. They cut almost everything. So the deforestation in Brazil starts in the 1500s when the colonization of the country started. When we start our distillery here in Morretes, we knew that. And we wanted to produce something very special to be appreciated all over the world. But we could bring to the world all the best that we have here. That is our cachaça. But we are very worried about the use Brazilian wood for doing that, because as Dragos mentioned to you, most of the Brazilian species used for that are dangerous. So we decided to use American oak. And since that moment, we start our production here using that. And as you may see, today we have something around 400 American oak here in our distillery on this place, and more other 2 places I'll show you later on. And we have some Brazilian woods, barrels made with Brazilian woods, very few, perhaps just 10 from those 400. And all the basis of everything that we do is the American oak. Even when we use Brazilian oak, when we use Brazilian wood, is just for finishing purposes. I just want to show you here some samples I get here, just showing the effect of the time that the cachaça spends on barrel. Oh, this is the silver cachaça. This is exactly as we get it from the pot still. Here, the color of cachaça aged 1 year in American oak. Here, 2 years, and here, 3 years. So related to the time in aging in the wood. And here also you see the ones we finish in Brazilian wood. This is finished in Castanheira, this is finished in Amburana, and this is finished in Araribá. And as I mentioned to you, the colors are very different. As you see, the taste, the aroma, all of them are very different. And here, some Brazilian wood. This is Castanheira, some barrels of Castanheiras. And these barrels are from legalized wood, of course. We just have a few of them. Also, I want to show you in the other area more. Just a minute. My signal is okay. I'm just walking.
Your signal is so, Torres. We'll
the
pay
other
attention.
area. Okay. Oh, here is the other area we use to age our cachaça. And here you see we have some of Brazilians wood barrels. This is Amburana. This is Amburana. This is Castanheira. And a little bit here. This is Araribá, or the zebra wood that Dragos mentioned to you. Okay.
And on that topic, on the zebra wood, somebody from the webinar side asked, why was the last sample so dark that you showed earlier? And that sample was from that zebra wood. Toys, can you show that barrel again, the Araribá?
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll talk about this in a second, guys. But you can see, to start with, it's a darker wood.
Oh.
And there's a lot of red in that barrel.
Wow, it smells very good.
Yeah. So, Toys, can you talk for a second about what happens when the American oak barrels come to us from Kentucky? How we repurpose them and what we do with them?
Yeah, the last containers, the last barrels we bought from US, coming from Kentucky, and before we take them to our alembic, we send that to another company that make all the internal process to grind and to toast it again, exactly in the way we asked them for do. And we have barrels here with very different toast, from light to what we call the crocodile skin. And all of them will produce a different kind of cachaça that will be later finally blended by our Dr. Cachaça that will talk to you later on. So
to summarize, guys, the barrels come and they have the trace of bourbon still left in them, and we sand them to remove the bourbon, to remove the char, expose fresh wood, put them back together and retoast them to anywhere from light to dark toast. But we prefer light and medium dark because that's kind of what works in our distillery in the jungle, where it's hot and it's humid and flavor is extracted fairly quickly from the wood itself. Okay, well, sounds good, Toys. Thank you for the tour, and I know you have something else to walk up to while we're talking. Let me know when you're there. I'm going to go back to a couple slides, and very important, I think, is to show you that what Toys has just described actually has made an impact to the cachaça industry in Brazil. If you want to learn quickly about the best cachaças in Brazil, you go to this organization called Cúpula da Cachaça that every 2 years does its own blind tasting and sets its favorite 50 cachaças. And they do not accept submissions because submissions can be fake. That's a very popular thing to do in Brazil. They just grab their own bottles off the shelves, the retail stores, and then they do blind tasting. There's 12 people in it. And the last time they did it was last year. And last year, we are lucky to have been selected as the #1 cachaça in Brazil. This Porto Mojetas Premium that you see here is the same juice with Novo Fogo barrel aged. As you know, we are one company, one family. We own 2 brands. Porto Mojetas is the Brazilian brand, and this particular one here has been named the best cachaça in Brazil last year. But here's something else that's very important. In the top 50, there were 30 oak barrels, of which 23 were American oak, most of them. And so that's about 60% of the oak was of the woods were actual oak, and about 30% of the woods were Brazilian woods, and then maybe 8% were unaged. This is a big deal. This is actually something that is important to realize, that the flavor of Brazil has changed so much in the last few decades, to the point where American oak is the #1 way to think of cachaça in Brazil. So I'm going to go back to my little slides for a second. And I'm going to tell you that oak is not the only answer. Of course, we do not believe that. It is a primary answer. It is a very important answer. But as you can see, even in our own line, we have so many different expressions, many of them aged in Brazilian woods too. But we do it in a particularly specific way. And the reason why we do that is because we believe that aging in Brazilian woods can be done, and it can be done right. So as a perhaps industry showcase, I want to tell you how we do it in the larger scheme of how it can be done. There are 3 ways to acquire Brazilian woods legally today. They could have been harvested before they became endangered. They could be purchased from the government when the government has some kind of a big project where they're taking down a bunch of trees because they're building a dam and they want to plant trees somewhere else. So it's all done fine. There's a balance there. And they have a little bit of wood for sale, and it goes very fast. Or it could be repurposed from other uses, such as a house, such as other barrels in the past. It could be reused time and time again. As long as you're not cutting trees down today, you are fine. So in the spirit of this, we have what we call our 2 wood series, in which we age these expressions first in oak to create that foundation that is both giving it flavor, making it mixable, and also resonates with people, because people do love the flavor of oak. But then we finish it in something that is Brazilian in order to give it that extra flavor. And we call that a finish. So it's a 2 wood cachaça, it's aged in oak, and it's finished in something exotic. And we have very limited numbers of them because, well, we'd have very limited number of barrels. For example, that araribá, that dark wood that we were talking about earlier, comes from an abandoned house on a partner's property. And that was a house that was not being used, and the cooper basically said he could make 2 barrels from it, and he made 2 barrels from it, 2 300-liter barrels. So we can actually make cachaça using these barrels from a house. That is a legal way to source it. But look, in order to get a Brazilian wood that is very hard to create a lot of flavor, we had to trick this wood into working with us quickly. So we left the barrel untoasted. Leaving the barrel untoasted gives it a lot of color. So when you give it a lot of color very fast, then you're going to just one second, actually. Here's what a red bottle looks like. It's intensely red because of that untoasted wood, and we pretty much tricked it and given us a lot of color and flavor very quickly. When we do this, we can go through a lot of volume very quickly with just 2 barrels. This is a win for us because we're using a sustainable wood, and yet we're highlighting the flavors of a native Brazilian tree. And then we have a few others. We have one that unfortunately is not available at this moment in time. We sold out of it last year. We call it Graciosa. It's a favorite of Kurt and Miriam's because they live on Estrada Graciosa and they own a resort called Posada Graciosa. It's a very important name to our town. It's a delightful flavor. It's aged in oak and it's finished in Brazil nut wood, which is called castanheira. So this, we could not do the whole untoasted wood thing. So it takes us a lot longer to make this. We have fewer cases for this. We can release it every couple of years. But we're fortunate that Agenor has a good reputation and he has a lot of knowledge about where to find legal wood. And every once in a while, we end up buying a few more barrels. So this is something that you'll be able to taste again if you didn't taste it last year. And then October 1st, we're going to release a third one. This is aged in oak and amburana, aka Brazilian teak. And it's one of those things that had to go back and forth between the two woods until we felt it was just the right balance. And amburana is a little more available. It's a softer wood. It doesn't require quite as long time in the wood for extracting that flavor. And so you'll probably see a little bit more from this, but not too much. Look at the number of cases here, 200, 300, 400 cases a year. That is definitely not a large volume. So in the study of these Brazilian woods, we have actually had a lot of support from Agenor's many decades of study. And Agenor is a professor at the Universidade Federal do Paraná in Curitiba, where he teaches cachaça distillation and sugarcane harvesting and Brazilian woods, knows more about Brazilian woods and cachaça aging than anybody else. And I'm gonna transfer this to him so he can talk to us about his studies, especially with Brazilian woods. So Agenor, you are unmuted and you are now in the spotlight. Hello.
Hi, everybody. It's a pleasure talking about the cachaça and the Brazilian wood. Okay. I teach at the university 25 years and I am studying Brazilian wood and the wood to aged cachaça 15 years. Okay. It's an amazing project in my life. Okay. The research starts when I receive samples of Brazilian wood to study. I will show some samples. Just a moment. I receive samples. The samples coming from different governmental institutes from Brazil. Yeah, I receive legal samples of different species. Okay, I receive the wood, the samples with docs. Yeah, and the first step I will cut to prepare small pieces. This is small pieces of wood from Amazonia. And I will prepare an infusion using alcohol, 50% of alcohol and water to produce an extract. And I will analyze this extract to discover the real potential to use the wood in cachaça. If I approve it in chemical analysis and sensorial analysis to taste the flavor, the aroma, the next step, I will produce small barrels. My special place here. The second step, I will use these small barrels, 20 liters of capacity, to study the aging process. Okay, I will analyze the time is possible to produce different barrels using the level of toast, medium, high. Okay, and I will take samples every month. I did this 1.5 years. I studied 17 different Brazilian woods. Yeah. So after this, it's possible to select the best woods to aged cachaça. But this is not the question. The question is, I need time to study the wood and the aged process. So I don't have time. The deforestation process destroy the trees, the woods, okay? Before I conclude the study, it's impossible. I need maybe 5-6 years to obtain very good results. So in 5 or 6 years, the species are endangered. So it is amazing, it's impossible to believe this. So it's very difficult to obtain wood to study, to produce tests, because I need legal wood from different regions, from different forests. It's very difficult to me obtain samples now. So, and after this step, 2 steps, using small pieces and using small barrels, how to obtain the wood I need wood to produce big barrels is impossible. So we are trying, okay, and we are using the results in our company, our production, to produce Brazilian wood barrels. To our project, 2 wood barrels, 2 wood barrels to age our cachaça, and it's possible using different levels of toast obtain a special cachaça using Brazilian wood barrels legally, okay? So I believe in the future it's possible. If we reforest new areas to obtain legal wood, it's possible obtain very good aged cachaça in Brazilian wood. But now it's difficult. It's difficult. Okay.
Agenor,
Dragos,
can you
question.
go back? Yeah, can you go back to your lab and show us some of the woods that you have there? You have a lot of different kinds of woods, and people in Europe and the United States have heard about these woods, and they're asking, why don't we see more of these things? Can you show some of the barrels and name some of those woods to see that they're not escaping us? We are testing them, we are researching them, but there are some real issues related to using them in production, as we've been talking about, the sourcing, the sustainable sourcing being the main one.
Just a moment.
What are some of those woods? Tell us the names.
Jequitibá.
Jequitibá rosa, highly endangered wood right there. Pink jequitibá.
Jequitibá. Balsamo.
Balsam wood.
Balsam wood.
Very flavorful, but
very hard, very flavor, so beautiful wood. Okay, and grapia.
Very sharp, like black pepper.
Yeah, and Jequitibá medium toasted. Amburana.
And actually, go back to Jequitibá for a second. I want to talk about that. It's so hard that it doesn't give much color or flavor at all. You can put liquid in that barrel for 3 years and it's still white. And the only way to get flavor from that is that first time when the barrel is fresh, you can get a little color, a little flavor from it. But the times after, when you're putting liquid in those barrels, it just becomes a stored situation. You're not really getting much flavor. So you have to basically go to new barrels all the time, which is impossible to do because there is no more Jequitibá rosa. It was the most common way to actually age cachaça for a long, long time, or to rest cachaça, Jequitibá rosa. And we were looking, when we started our company, we were looking at this wood, and we almost even made the tree, the Jequitibá rosa, the tree in the logo of our brand. But we decided this tree is not going to be around. So why would we want to draw attention to it when it's going to disappear? It's like shooting ourselves in the foot. So instead, we're walking away from it. And we're saying, let's give it some time to recover. So that's my story about Jequitibá rosa. Very important to me, actually. It's sad what happened to it, though.
I like Jequitibá rosa to aged cachaça because the color do not change a lot. Is very light in the first use, and after this seems a silver cachaça. Okay.
Yeah.
But it's very important to use Jequitibá if the company, another company listed in the north, produces cachaça with high acidity. Okay, high acidity. So Jequitibá decrease the acidity. Is very good to produce a cachaça, soft cachaça, okay, So it's amazing. So we have to cabreúva.
Cabreúva is mahogany.
Yeah, it's the same genus of balsam. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Ipe
amarelo. That's walnut.
Yeah, beautiful,
Mm-hmm.
Itaúba,
Mm-hmm.
ou tapinhoá. Okay.
Impossible to source now.
Yeah, it's impossible. It's impossible. I have, because I work with the Institute to Protect the Brazilian Wood. So it's important study to the future, to the protection of these species. So to me it's possible, but the commercial production of barrel is not permitted more.
Yeah.
It's impossible. Okay.
Well, Agenor, this is good. Thank you. I think that, you know, the message we're trying to send is there are many kinds of woods, but very few are actually available for production in reality. And if we're trying to make cachaça a mainstream category, we have to look at the scalable resources that we have. And in fact, I see Torres is standing in the field and he wants to show us something. Agenor, can we go back to Torres?
Okay. Thank you.
You bet. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Torres,
Hi, Dragos.
what are you looking at?
Okay. Well, I want to show you here one tree that we show you the barrels. That is a tree that we planted here 2.5 years ago. It's a tree of Araribá, the zebra wood. Look that. So he's twice as me right now. It's really tall in just 2.5 years. Later on, Dragos will explain the plans. We have to plant more and more trees like that and try to help our country to have more forests as we had in the past. Okay, Dragos.
Thank you, Torres. It's a tree that's very important to us too, as it was planted in the honor of somebody who departed us, and we try to take legacy seriously. So Araribá is something that we're trying to learn to work with. We've done some work here, and we'll continue to do that. Thank you, Torres, for going out in the field, and I'm glad your connection worked. So
thank you.
I will. I have another question from the audience about how long until the tree that Torres showed it matures, and it takes what's like 25, 30 years, Luke? Yeah, it takes a long time. So it's not like we can really go through these really fast. What this leads to is the fact that we want to make sure that you know how this affects you, because you remember, knowledge is important, and not just the people in Brazil who work off the land make distinctions, but also the people who consume in the rest of the world, who dictate what should be made with their demand, with their interest, create a direction for where all of this goes. So when you're presented with a cachaça that is aged in a Brazilian wood, you should do 3 things. Number 1, look at our table and see what the status of that wood is. If it says that it's endangered, then ask about the source. And frankly, there should be papers about where those barrels came from. And even so, even all of it looks good, think about it a little bit and decide, do I want to be the last one to have something that is going away? Or do I want to step away from it, perhaps reduce my interest and allow it to revive, to recover, so that most of us can have access to it in the future? And this is something that I think is becoming very relevant. The same organization called Cúpula da Cachaça, that has 12 members, has a magazine, and in this magazine, one of them wrote this article about sustainability, saying Brazil is kind of behind on sustainability. The United States and Europe are ahead of it. And he makes this prediction that within a few years, the Brazilian cachaça producers, and perhaps other producers of other things, will be required to show certificates of sustainable production and sustainable sourcing of the components that go into production, starting with the woods used in the barrels. And I hope Seu Candeias is right. I think this is exactly what should happen, and I think it will happen, and I think that's going to happen faster than you believe. Otherwise, most of these woods will never be used again. They could even become illegal. So I want to show you that we really do care about this, not enough just to talk about it, but actually to do something. So this is where we go back to Brazil, to Kurt and Miriam, and we tell you about their property and their effort of what they're trying to do there. And I wanted to put this on a map so you can see. Sao Paulo is in the top right corner of the screen. Curitiba, our capital city, is right next to us. And we're in this area called Serra do Mar, Mountains of the Sea, very close to the Atlantic Ocean, in the jungle. It's a very, very rich place. And these two guys own some land there, quite a bit. You can see the aerial view of a lot of jungle. And they designated 42 acres of their property as a private reserve. They cannot be touched for anything. And in this private reserve, they have some amazing objectives. And I'd like to ask them to talk about that for a few minutes with us. And here's a view that I think one of us took a picture of, but they're sitting right there. So we'll let them show us directly. Guys, how are you?
Very well, thanks, Dragos.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us. So tell us about Posada Graciosa and the RPP and the private reserve, and why you did it.
So we've been here for nearly 10 years now. And when we arrived, we had this land, but we wanted to be sure that nobody would mess with that. So I thought that turning it into a reserve would help to protect this piece of land. So we started the process. And so even this area one day in the past was devastated in a way. So it's not, the forest now is growing. It's been untouched for like 20 years, I believe, or longer than that, 25 years. But you know, we lack those trees that you were talking about, because they were the first ones to be cut down when the Portuguese arrived to Brazil. So we don't have them anymore. So we always, knowing that you and Novo Fogo are interested in those trees, it makes us really happy, because they grow in areas with shade, and that's what we have here. And it's going to change our piece of land. Maybe it's going to be fast to get to the original forest if we have some help.
That's right, and that's why we think that this project is very worthwhile. When what these guys have been doing there is just so important, and they do it out of the goodness of their heart. They take their own property and say, we can't touch it. We want nobody to touch it. We want it to become perfect forever. So we put it in a private reserve. That is a fantastic way to think about something, instead of trying to get value out of it. So we think that projects like this are worthwhile, and we wanted to associate ourselves with it, and we want to support it. And we'll show you soon how we're supporting it and how you guys can do the same thing. So guys, what do you think can happen in the long term over there? What are some of your long-term objectives?
I think we can be an example for the other owners, because when you see the map, this area is huge, but you know there are different kinds of owners. So I think in this example, one day is going to be something, and that's what we hope. And Brazil, I think, is changing, and we might. I need your help. we might. Luckily, other people are going to give the right value to this area, the Atlantic rainforest, and how beautiful it is. We have in our yard, we have seen more than 100 different species of birds. Some of the trees here, they are like 60 years old. We don't see that anymore. So when people come here and they see that, so it is like a seed in their brain. So, you know, it's so beautiful. I think I would like to help. We like are spreading the idea. When we have this beautiful place, and we receive many visitors. So when they see that, how cool it is, how beautiful it is, all this variety, all this diversity, I think we can change.
I think it's important to remember, Dragos, like you were saying, like Miriam has said. I mean, we're focused on the trees and the wood, and of course the great cachaça that comes out of that. But the tree is just one part of the entire ecosystem, and by helping speed up the process of reforestation here and putting in some of these long-lived ancient trees, it's going to enhance the value to all the animals, the bird life, of course, the mammals, the insects, everything relies on that. So, I mean, our goal is just to try to give back a little bit of something to nature, to give this area a little more recognition, just build some simple trails so the whole world has the ability to access this, you know, small piece of paradise and understand that there's value in preservation, even to places that you'll never see.
Yeah, and what we call that, guys, is positivity spreads. That's what we think is when you see something positive that you want to carry it forward and share it with the others. Eventually, it causes positive effects everywhere that you go. And I agree. And I don't know if you guys saw earlier, but the guys registered 88 species of birds on this reserve. And earlier, Miriam was saying that they're probably over 100 at this point in time. And we benefit from the friendship of an amazing guy named Luciano, who is one of the most well-known ornithologists in Brazil. And he has a wealth of knowledge and is helping us with all of that. So we hope to put a bird watching tower there someday. We can actually hear the birds right now, by the way. And I know you're far away, but we can hear those birds. And we want to make sure that we basically try to help you in your objectives. And here's how we're going to do it. Actually, this is what we propose to everybody, and this is what we're going to do, and this is what everybody else can do. The first thing is that we're going to donate a percentage of our revenues to the private reserve for the Two with Cachaças. 10% of revenues goes to just general funds for the nonprofit that operates the private reserve. The second thing that we're going to ask folks to do is that every time a Novo Fogo drink is placed on a cocktail menu, we will source a tree and we will plant a tree on that property. And we're not planting trees to cut them down later and make barrels. We're planting trees to plant trees. When somebody cuts down a tree, we will plant a tree somewhere else. And the third thing in which people can get involved is that we're going to sell some things like this t-shirt, and we're going to donate all the profits to the general fund that operates the private reserve too. And this is going to be available on our website very soon here. We'll send an announcement out. But as we go, we think that this has a lot of potential to become something more than it was ever before. And we will probably continue to contribute in new ways as the project moves forward. By the way, that's one of the 12 types of tanager that are recorded on this private reserve. And it's also the name of one of our expressions. It's a mighty little bird that we think is very important to our community and also to our efforts that we do there. So this is pretty much what we had to talk about today. I want to tell you that next time, in 2 weeks from today at 11 o'clock Pacific time as well, we're going to do one more episode. We call it the human investment. And during this episode, we're going to do something pretty special. We're going to invite our entire team at the distillery in Brazil to talk to you directly. We're going to have a little round table in which you can ask them questions directly, and they will answer them live. It will be folks like Otero on the left and Sandro on the right, who cut sugarcane during harvest season and who do all sorts of things inside the building. You can talk directly to the folks who work there in the jungle. And I would like to ask, perhaps, to help us prepare, that you send an email with any questions you have ahead of time to Luke at rio@novofogo.com. It's right there. And that would be really nice to do, because then we can have them fairly organized, in a fairly organized manner, respond to the questions. But that's what the next episode is going to be about. We'll take away the PowerPoint slides and we'll just talk live to real people who are the foundation of everything that we do. So I want to thank everybody who helped me participate today. I hope that you all enjoyed what we had to tell you. And there will be a recording of this video right on our Facebook page to watch from. And if you're not on Facebook, if you're through our webinar platform, we will have a recording of that as well. We'll post afterwards. You can just write to me. So everybody, this is what I had to say. Thank you to all of you in Brazil for helping us out, and let's keep up the good work, right?
Thank you,
Thanks.
Dragos.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.